Today, I'm thrilled to introduce you to Chloe Bullock from Materialised Interiors. Chloe is an award-winning interior designer. PETA named her their Compassionate Designer of 2023. She was the first UK designer to become vegan certified, and she's the author of a book, Sustainable Interior Design, which was commissioned by the Royal Institute of British Architects. Chloe, it's lovely to see you. Welcome to Stand Up for the Story podcast.
Thank you ever so much for having me, Rachel. It's lovely to be here.
Oh, it's lovely to see you. So we're going to begin this conversation with the same question that I ask all of our guests. What's the story that you're here to stand up for?
I'm here to stand up for the story of interior design, which has a multitude of faces to it. And I'm realising over my career that it has some really kind of negative sides to it. I've realised in my 30 years of being a designer, the way that we buy things and the disconnection at every turn really is happening. So there's a disconnection from our connection with craft. It always used to be very connected to crafts and having things made locally and celebrating things that were made far away. I was in the Royal Pavilion last week and, you know, the wallpapers there were the first sort of colourful wallpapers used in that kind of environment, and they were brought and they were very special. And we have a different story to things that are from different parts of the world because there's some negative impacts that are reported and found, and there's a disconnection to nature. The impact of the choices that we make in our work have an impact on nature through using these things as resources right through to what happens to things at the end of their life cycle, and where do they go and where does that ultimately end up. And sadly, there's toxic chemicals being used in my industry that end up all over the place, you know, the highest points of the planet, the lowest depths of water, and these all find their way into our bodies. People are working very quickly, and they're working very quickly to please their clients. But in the process of that, there's some things that are being overlooked along the way.
We're all creating our own spaces and designing interiors, whether we're professional or not, aren't we? And the things that we put into those spaces, most of them come from nature, don't they?
Yeah, and like most things, biodiversity is the source of everything, most of our food, most of our medicines. It's so life-supporting, but yet it also gives us the materials that we work with. And there's stories there, you know, just around timber sources and whether things are from managed forests, if there's care there, or if it's from illegal logging. And that takes away natural habitats. That means that people aren't paid fairly and they're not treated fairly. It's a story of opportunity to do better, make better choices, tell stories with your decisions that you make.
So how does this story currently show up in the world? In terms of interior design, what's wrong with it at the moment?
Well, it's currently heavily part of a marketing machine that is just encouraging non-mindful use of things for limited amount of times. It's not this sort of deep love of this deep emotional attachment to things that you will keep for a long time.
Did you have a personal aha moment that led you to do the work that you do?
Well, first of all, it's a lovely industry that has lots of opportunities. The work that we do as designers is very much solving problems for people and helping making spaces more livable. Everyone goes to luxury interior design, but I've done a lot of work with healthcare, and there's problem solving that we can do. We can design for people that are less able, and we can make places easier. So there's a beauty in that. It's seen as a very glamorous industry, but in my time, these 3 decades, I can see that we are impacting the planet, we're impacting people, and we're impacting animals. Sadly, there's sort of stories that we tell ourselves that make everything okay, but the reality is there's a lot of grimness out there, there's a lot of harm. If we're not using sustainable timber, for example, that means that it's coming from somewhere where it's illegally logged. And then there's a whole lot of toxic chemicals we're using that are present in anything that anybody could be buying. I mean, sadly, in the UK, we're still having to put huge amounts of toxic chemicals into our sofas, beds to make them flame retardant. Now, those are causing instant problems in our homes. They're causing problems down the life cycle of a product. So that will then find its way into waterways, land. These are decisions that people make who are homeowners or anyone who has their own space. They are buying things. We're not always aware of the whole picture. So yes, it's really slowly moving on to being conscious about the carbon impact of the choices that we make. But I really want to push it further and get biodiversity footprint information and water footprint information, because just the choice between an organic cotton or a regular cotton, there's a huge difference in the water footprint. And organic cotton is without fertilisers, it's without fossil fuels and toxic chemicals as well. And it regenerates the soil, which is something we really need to be thinking about as well. So we've been very carbon focused, but there's a lot of other impact. My background is working for The Body Shop as a retail designer, which is 10 years and gave me loads of experience and loads of insights, and we scrutinised everything we used. And then coming out into the industry and working on non-commercial projects as well as commercial. Of course, there's a whole host of other materials out there that we use in our homes that we don't use in like a retail environment. So a lot of textiles, things like that. And so I heard about this vegan design certified course and just put myself on it because I needed to know about this whole other area. And that's when I learned all the undercover investigations from PETA to support things like live plucking, which happens for down. And it seems that it's very hard to truly have a chain of custody for these things, sadly. So even when we're being told it's ethical, it's not necessarily, there's a lack of transparency in supply chains and it's causing problems. And the thing that was shocking me about that in particular was a goose would be plucked while they're alive and then they're allowed to grow back their feathers and then they take the down out again. So it just happens repetitively. It's just horribly violent. And the same with Angora, even looking at silk. These may not be animals that you can interact with necessarily, but it's still horribly cruel to boil a silkworm alive. And we have all these alternatives now.
And I think as well, meeting you has been my real aha moment, because obviously we've known each other for a few years. And I think the live plucking for pillows and duvets and things like that was a real eye-opening moment to look around my house and see all the different products I've got, and if I'm going to replace them, what I should do. And like I've said to you before, we were mindful to have a bamboo floor put in here, and when you do choose the more sustainable option or a natural option like that, your well-being is better as well, because I love just walking on bamboo. It's just so lovely.
Yeah, I've been talking about negatives, but there's so many positive things that we can do. Yeah, just seeing something on a daily basis and sort of having that feel-good feeling because you feel like you've made a good decision. I mean, bamboo is brilliant. It's so suitable and it grows so quickly. It sequesters carbon as it grows. So there are so many positive stories and so much choice out there now that we just don't need to sort of dwell. And the other thing that I noticed on that course was whenever there was animal welfare concerns, there's also human concerns. Workers aren't treated well. They're sloshing around in chemicals in tanneries, and that chemical slurry then goes out into waterways and people eat food from the rivers. And it isn't only a sort of animal issue, it's an everything issue. So it's just an indicator. And we have so many alternatives now to leather, for example, that are not using fossil fuel. Even the PVC version is better than leather, but that doesn't make it good. There's like animal agriculture alternatives now. So using waste products, waste fibres and things to turn them into a positive material that is much more healthy to live with as well and kind to make.
Yeah. So what do you think the real problem is here with interior design and that current story of how it is?
I guess there's an image problem. There's this sort of glamour image of it, and so people are delivering to that, or they're not delving into the backstory of things. And then there's a supply chain issue of lack of transparency. So we're kind of constantly being told these stories of things being byproducts when they're often co-products. They're often equally as valuable as the meat, for example, if it's leather, for example. I find it very hard to connect to some of my clients because they're in this world of interior design is cushions and curtains. I can't think of a time when I've really got into specifying either of those, actually. My part of interior design is getting involved very early on in the project and looking at the building and the positioning and the nature, and before we've even got a building in place, I love to get into all of that. Yeah, and interior design isn't only about shopping.
And the idea that once you have that building, it's the flooring, the walls, the windows, whether you have wooden windows or not. Lots of decisions before you even get to the decor side of things.
Yeah, so and kind of how the building works with humans and how it works with the location and how nature is part of all of that. We need to, design in things like cross ventilation, and we need to make them healthy spaces to live in and to extend their life as long as possible. Every year in the UK, we are landfilling the most part of 22 million pieces of furniture a year, which I find so shocking. So that just points to, yes, an interior designer can help you make good choices for the fixed things, but the loose things that come into a space are very much in a churn, and there's this horrible following of trends and people getting rid of things just because they've gone off it because of a trend passing and not having that emotional connection to something that they're buying, or not appreciating who's made it and getting involved in that process. In the early days, I was much more able to work with craftspeople and bringing a client into that. And it's a lovely experience for a client.
And these things are built to last as well. They can become legacy pieces as well, can't they?
Definitely. Yeah, and it's crazy. I noticed that when I was researching the book, the things that we hand down to generation, and now it's cash and jewellery and maybe some art. But in the past, they used to pass down beautiful bedding. There's things like that. We're just not attached to things for long enough. We're not appreciating.
And because they come in huge quantities, we're not going to appreciate them, are we? No. So what do you think needs to change in the way that we all approach buildings and interiors?
I wish everyone would slow down, just not be in such a hurry to have this instant result, and maybe take time, collect things, and take time to get the design right. And when it comes to the sort of supply chain side, realise that even one person asking a question, being inquisitive about something, can have a knock-on effect. And one of the positive things that's been happening in the last 10 years is, for years I was asking about the certification of timber, if it's sustainable, and people at the other end literally didn't know what I was asking about. And now they're much more readily available with the answers, which goes to show that a question does cause ripples and it can turn things around. So it feels very empowering, really, to feel that you can ask those things. And these supply chains are in business to satisfy what we want. So, the demands, they will respond to us. A lot of larger clients in the world of corporate social responsibility, they want to do the right things. They have some kind of measuring happening. They feel there's a duty to do the right thing. But I just wish that people could just deeply care and just want to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And I wish that I could find ways to engage people in wanting the good stuff.
Yeah. And so my next question is, what's the answers that you bring? And I think you've spoken quite eloquently about a lot of what those are. But also, I know one of the answers is your book, Sustainable Interior Design. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Sustainable feels like the wrong word, but I used the word sustainable for the book because I wanted to make something that was familiar and not lose people by giving it a name of something that was better, like regenerative design. But the trouble that I'm finding is it's not only my fellow designers, it's sustainability generally. I think people see it as such a big thing that they just don't know how to start. And there's almost like a paralysis around that. So what I wanted to help people with, and actually the book could apply to anything, but I'm just using interior design as the examples. So I've just split it down into 11 approaches, so 11 threads to sustainability that you could bring in as a project goal if you're a designer, or if you're a client, it's something that's really important to you, and then you can communicate that to your project team, and people will try and deliver as best they can around that desire. So these 11 approaches really cross-cut all through sustainability in different ways, but literally they all are facets of living in harmony with nature, considering future generations and not taking away from future generations. And the idea is, so for me, my passions were circular economy and vegan design, avoiding animals as resources and for testing as well in my industry, and using the circular economy. So for me, I've come into sustainability from those angles, but now I'm picking up other bits along the way, and it's just something that you then build on. So I thought that by demonstrating these 11 approaches, then it would really help people to see what's possible. Because in there's some amazing people who are literally breaking the ways of doing things. And that is really what we need to do. We've got to stop these patterns of how we work and how things are made, how projects are carried out. And things are very isolated currently, and you can't beat everybody working around one thing, and it will be so much better. So that could be a project team. What I find disappointing is that my industry, we specify something and it's passed along a chain. We very rarely hear about how that experience is at the end for the post-occupancy. So we very rarely go back and say what's worked, what hasn't, monitor things, see how healthy the spaces are and make learnings from that. So we're in danger of just constantly churning out things without being mindful of the latter part of the project. I find that really crazy. And also all those people along the way, I want to know if things aren't performing well. I want to know things aren't easy to clean.
Is that something you do with your clients?
I try really hard to, yeah, because it feels like we're working in a line. It's like a production line, but the more we can work in a circle, the better what we produce will become. Yeah. So yeah, it's quite hard. It's hard to break these ways, but that's the ideal for sure.
Yeah. So it's 5 years' time and the brand new story of interior design is in existence in the world and everything has transformed. What would that look like?
It would look considered and conscious and responsible and joyful.
How would spaces and buildings and everyone's homes look different?
If we could consider our buildings as material banks, not only will they have conscious things within and be consciously designed to integrate nature, they will be material banks for reuse in the future, and they will have radio frequency labels on products or QR codes on products so that you can truly maintain and then break down things at the end of their life and have information to tap back into to work out what was this made of, can we recycle it once it's really at the end of its use.
I've always had this thing through the work that you do of having this vision of homes and spaces and houses that aren't created with any cruelty or they're kind. You always talk about the kind spaces and that well-being aspect. There's so much talk about reconnecting with nature, and you can't always reconnect with nature if you don't have a garden or if you don't have access to green space. And I think being able to do that through your home, surrounding yourself with natural products in your home, is the well-being factor would shoot up, I'm sure.
Definitely, yeah. And that's what I need to get better at doing, is selling the well-being statistics to people, because we know generally that it's a good thing to do. And integrating nature into your home, it's often seen as just green things, which are wonderful, but it's as simple as having really good air quality, whether that means shutting out the external air because your indoor air is filtered and there's air handling, or if the water quality, it's like seeing grain, timber, seeing not too kind of straight lines, and the minimalist interior, which is probably, my home is probably a bit like that, but an untidier version, but is not always the best for us. We want to have a connection to the things that are around us, see swirls and organic and soft lines and not too hard edges. All of those things build up to our nature connection in a space. And even if we can't get real nature into spaces, seeing those forms tricks our brains. So it all has a health consideration. I recently heard some feedback on the use of mass timber in the building industry, and they have left timber exposed on the interiors So instead of covering everything up in the old way of doing things with plasterboard, they've left timber panels, and people are having a wellness benefit for that. They feel more comfortable. They're reporting that they are having a better quality life. That's lovely.
Just by actually doing less.
Yeah. So almost honest materials have a payback as well we don't need to do everything the old ways.
So with the kind of idea that every journey starts with baby steps, I'm going to ask you this question for two different types of people. First of all, for interior designers, and then for normal non-interior designers like me. What's the one thing that listeners can do right now to change the story of interior design? So what's the one thing those interior designers out there can do to start with?
I feel like I'm being repetitive if I say about asking the question, just being inquisitive. Learning how to interpret the answers that you'll get and what that means, and looking at things holistically and not just a one issue. So being mindful of more than carbon and looking at everything, really homing in on the biodiversity crisis and the impact that our decisions have on that.
Do you think that interior designers consider that much, or is it still just not even a consideration?
I think I admire my industry enormously. They have to wear so many hats, and it's a busy industry to be in. I don't think people stop to really think about that, and just a switch of a specification from a non-certified to a GOTS or a fair trade. Who's made something? What's the impact of that? And are they paid a living wage? I just don't think people...
Really back to basics.
Yeah, sadly. Yeah. I just don't think people have time to stop to think about that.
And what about homeowners, renters?
Yeah, so for people's spaces, thinking about you and me, because I had a home that had animal products in it until I'd taken that course. What to do about these things? Do I want to get rid of them? As soon as I know that there's horror, I would just look at things on an item by item basis. I have passed things on to be reused. I didn't want things to get thrown away and wasted, because that feels like all that horror has been for nothing as well. So sometimes people might feel that they just want to use those things till the end of their life and then think about what to do next. And I've done that with a few things. But for me, because I am vegan as well, there's this sort of residual feeling with things, and I don't want to have those reminders on a daily basis. So it's a very individual thing, isn't it? But then when you do buy things, use things like Ethical Consumer magazine to help you make better choices aligned with your values. They've got really great score tables and things. I use them. I'm a subscriber. I find it really helpful. Also, this whole shopping thing, I've got a way that I work, and it's like a pyramid, and at the top I want to do the most of urban mining. What's already here? Can I reuse things?
What's urban mining?
It's literally using what's already here. So it could be literally stripping out materials and using them in another space, reusing furniture, lighting, things that already exist. So it's another way, I guess, of saying using pre-loved things in some form or other. But then thinking about the next stage, and can I scrutinise what I'm using if I do have to buy new things? Yeah, it's just encouraging just to stop and look around first.
Take that pause and that it's like being more mindful of where your products are coming from.
And then you get that great feeling when you notice them on a daily basis, because you're like, I took some trouble over that, and I feel great about it. And there's a real feel-good feeling for this.
I can remember speaking to you when I was buying some new chest of drawers, because the ones in the bedroom weren't big enough, and I didn't want to go out and just buy the ones from the big shop.
Yeah,
we all love. I didn't want to go and just do that, so I ended up buying much more expensive ones. But there's two, so there's one each for each of the kids.
Buying a familiar, established name like that, it will hold on to its value. It is something you will pass on. It's lovely. Yeah, you're buying something very disposable. You treat it in a disposable way. You certainly don't have an emotional connection to it. So that's so lovely. I'm glad you did that. I've forgotten about that.
And you've inspired me with a lot of things, actually. Definitely. I always stop to think about what can I do? What's the ethical, sustainable, kind version of this product, I think. And that's definitely come from your work. So thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm so pleased.
So where can we find out more about your work and Materialised Interiors? Whereabouts are you?
I'm online, so materialisedinteriors.com, and I quite like being on Instagram, so that's materializeint, and I'm also on LinkedIn, which I really like as well. So yeah, I'm in those places.
Thank you so much, Chloe. It's been great to go behind the scenes of all your work and your groundbreaking adventure to stand up for the story of interior design.
Well, thanks so much for all you've done to help me, Rachel. It's been wonderful, but it's lovely to be here today as well.
You too. Thank you. If anything you've heard today has inspired you to want to create a brand new story for your company, please visit brandnewstory.co.uk to find out more. And to support the show, please can you hit that subscribe button, leave a review and share this episode with other pioneers in your network. And remember, keep pushing those boundaries, keep standing up for those stories, and I'll see you next time.